X-Men 97 Season 2 is back with a 3-episode premiere. But are we back, baby? Welcome back, everyone. We're here today to talk about X-Men 97 Season 2, the first 3 episodes. There is so much to discuss, but before we do, I would like to know, what other show would you like to see get a comeback like we've seen with X-Men, the animated series? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you want even more X-Men content from me, I am doing reactions as well on the channel for members, and you can also find them over on my Patreon. So either for my Golden Fanging members here or over on the Patreon. Check it out if that's something you're interested in. And I also have my comic book club where we talked about the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, which also is a story that we take from in these first 3 episodes. First things first, I would like to say the music is so good in these first 3 episodes. I really loved it. And there is specific moments that I'm going to talk about as we go through, but just know the music, it's all bangers, baby. The animation so far in these episodes is a little bit inconsistent, but when it is good, it's really good. It's clear that I think our animation team got more of a budget this time around, but I also feel like there was some more balancing of the budget that's happening. So you have scenes and shots that look absolutely amazing, and then you have some other ones that are a little more basic, not as much going on. So that's where we're at. But overall, I'm enjoying the look of the show. I'm enjoying the sound of the show. But what about the story? Let's talk about that. So I'd like to start off with episode 1, which is written by Bradford Sullivan. That's our main writing credit for this episode. I think there are some really good changes that they made to adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix in this episode, which is heavily what it takes inspiration from. It is a story where Jean and Scott are pulled from their honeymoon and sent through time to in other younger bodies that they take in the future, and they have to help Nathan, who is their son, Nathan Dayspring, he's known here in this time period. They have to help him journey across, and they got to face apocalypse. And in this episode, that's kind of what we're doing. But of course, we have more characters here, and some of the changes that they made I really loved. Like, for example, you know, we have Mother Ascani here, and she actually gets to live in the original story. She dies, although I don't know if it's a permanent death because it is comics. But in this version, she remains, and she actually provides a little bit more guidance for our team. Now, of course, we don't get a reveal about who she is, that she's Rachel Summers. And honestly, when Scott goes to talk to her, I thought maybe we were going to get something like that, but I don't really mind that we didn't, because I don't know if that needed to happen here. There's already a lot going on in this episode, especially in terms of the family. And one of my favorite moments in the entire episode is when Scott and Jean reveal to Nathan that they are his parents and that they did love him. They didn't just abandon him, but they had to send him away for his own benefit because they thought it was the right thing to do. And they do this in a moment where they need him to use his abilities in order to get out of captivity. And because of this revelation that his parents are here and that they do love him and they do care about him, he's able to use his powers to escape. And I thought all of that was beautifully done. I thought taking the quote from season 1 when they send him off and they want him to remember that they love him, I thought was beautiful. And I know there's going to be some people that are going to say, isn't this Maddie Erasure? You know, Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, who we saw in season 1, who I loved having her here. She's one of my favorite characters of all time. But I think it's important to remember, and I just want to remind everyone, that Jean is also Cable's mom. I know it's confusing and I know it's weird, but it's true. Jean and Maddie are both his mom. And honestly, we could still see Maddie return at some point. She does return in the comics. She's brought back to life by an alternate reality son, Nate Gray, and it's super weird, and it gets kind of romantic. It's weird. So I hope if we do bring her back that we don't go that route, but We'll see. For now, I'm just happy to have our little family back together with Scott, Jean, and Nathan. I think that's really lovely. Of course, not everything is different in this episode, and one of the things that I was really impressed that they kept, and somehow I thought they made work better than the comic does, is this idea that Apocalypse needs to regenerate and he requires kind of hosts. And in this case, Nathan is that host that he's hoping to get. I was impressed that they did that, and I liked it. So, good job. Good job, X-Men 97. It was lovely. I thought this was a really solid start. Episode 1 was a really solid start to X-Men 97 Season 2. And Episode 1, Days of Past Future, not to be confused with Days of Future Past, is our beautiful start that leads into an episode that I absolutely adored. I didn't think it could get better than this next episode, and that is A Force to be Reckoned With. A Force. Not to be confused with A-Force, which is a different team from the comics, but A-Force as in X-Force. Honestly, they should have just called it X-Force to be reckoned with. No, that's probably way too punny. This episode is written by Anthony Saletti and Mariah Wilson, and I could not believe how amazing this episode was. I mean, episode 1 was good. I enjoyed it, but episode 2 was peak from the moment it started. I mean, the intro alone in this, when they pulled back to reveal it's X-Force instead of X-Men for the title, I lost my mind. If you watch the reaction, you'll see it happen in real time where I'm like, oh, we're just doing X-Force intro. That's what this is. Once again, the intros in general are amazing because they're changing it up with every intro, just these little details that are relevant to the episode itself and are also helping to build out the full picture of what we're going to see this season. So pay close attention to those intros, and maybe at some point I'll even do a video where I just go through the intros and talk about all the little details that are in there, because the intros alone are just Easter eggs galore. And I loved what we did building up this tension between X Factor and X-Force in this episode. It made me think, are we going to get Executioner's song? Which is something I talked about in my theories video before this show came about, and I do think it's likely that it's going to happen. We'll talk about that a little bit more in my theories video, so stay tuned for that, but yeah, I loved it. X Factor here is working with the government. They're Val's team, essentially, rounding up mutants for their own safety, but also rounding up mutants for their own safety and putting them in power dampening collars and locking them up in cells, which I gotta say, X Factor, what are you doing here, man? What are you doing? This team is still a really cool team, and the only downside, I think, for X Factor is that there are characters that I love that are on this team, like Strong Guy, like, you know, Multiple Man, Jamie Madrox, and they don't get a ton of moments, but Polaris and Havoc do, and I love both of those characters. I really love Havoc a lot, and I think this show is going to make me love Polaris even more than I have through the comics. I'm not super into Polaris in the comics. I haven't read a ton of her stuff, and so she's a character I just haven't gotten to know as well, but I know there's a lot of you out there that love her, so, you know, shout outs in the comments for who you love from X Factor or X-Force. Like, let's talk about that, because so many good characters right now, so many good characters, and there's only so much screen time to go around, and I am hoping that as we go through, we're going to see more. I also felt like in episode 1, we didn't get enough of Morph either. I wanted more Morph stuff, so I am a little starved for all of my favorites, but that's what happens when you have a really stacked cast. We have to pick and choose our moments. We also get a lot of good moments on the X-Force side from Psylocke and Archangel as well, and I love that they're also here. We have these two couples on either side that I enjoy, Archangel and Psylocke, and on the other side, Havoc and Polaris. And Psylocke, man, they made her so cool in this, and I love that. That is essential to the character. And we are getting Betsy in Quannen's body Psylocke, which I wasn't sure if they were going to do that, because in retrospect, it's kind of weird, but it is also the 90s, and the 90s are, to be honest, kind of weird in comics. And I say this as a fan of 90s comics. It's not putting them down, it's just acknowledging what they are. So Betsy is here as Quannen. And I love her voice. I think they did a great job with her voice. Archangel's voice took a little bit to grow on me, but by the time episode 2 rolled around and he got some more lines, I got more comfortable with it. So yeah, and it's one of those things where it just doesn't feel as Warren Worthington III to me, but at the same time, this is Warren as Archangel, which is kind of a different persona for the character. So it makes sense that there's a little bit of a change to it. I love that Psylocke gets so many cool fighting moments. She gets to use her Psy blades, and she also just is drawn really well. Like, she looks so jacked. It's awesome. All of these characters are cool to see, regardless of how much time we get to see them doing things. And we do have more episodes coming, so I'm sure there will be more to the teams, more that we'll get to see as time goes on. Another character that appears in episode 2, which I was very happy to see because I know we were starved for more of her, is Emma Frost. That's right, the White Queen herself makes an appearance. And I love how she brings X-Force into kind of this trap and then just turns into her diamond form and is like, yawn, while the battle's happening. I thought that they did such a good job with Emma in this. I mean, I want more Emma. I want more of her. Please give us more Emma or give us death. Not the Horsemen. Just end it all if we don't get more Emma. I will have to say, with Jubilee getting this amazing sequence where she gets to take on all the guards and use her powers, and her shoes, she has rollerblades in her shoes. I was like, I don't even know, did she just have her Walkman with her the whole time, her Discman, or I don't know, but I'm just here for all of it. I thought it was really fun. I thought they did a great job with the Jubilee sort of stepping into this role of really being a very adept fighter. She's been training with Psylocke, and I thought that that was really cool to see her right in the action, freeing all of these other mutants and then just piecing out. I think that X-Force, honestly, I'm more on their side right now. I think that they have some good points, and sure, Cable's methods may be not normally a hero's methods, but these are trying times. We are in a pretty tumultuous, chaotic time for the X-Men right now. So I think X-Force is the right side for me so far. Although, you know, we'll see when we get the X Factor episode and we learn probably more about what's going on over there. Maybe they'll sway me. They do have multiple, man. There's also a really sad element to this episode, of course, when we get Nathan having to time slide his parents away after he gets his little cube supercomputer. I loved that. I mean, I loved his computer in the original animated series as well. So seeing him get it here, it just, I don't know. I just watched those episodes recently, so it was very nostalgic for me, I guess. And then seeing him have to say goodbye and make that hard choice was very sad. I cried. I did cry. And, you know, Apocalypse seems to be planning some stuff in the modern day, if we're to be believing Cable here. But the question is, what is his plan, you know? Is he gonna just come back with Horsemen like he did originally in the animated series and try to wreak havoc, or is there more to it? I guess we're gonna have to wait to find out. In episode 3, we're more focused on the past, and this is Rise of Apocalypse Part 1, which I love. I love a multi-parter. What can I say? I'm here for that. They got me. And of course, Rise of Apocalypse is actually a mini-series, so it's taking some inspiration for that, where we go into some of En Sabanur's origin story. And we also have the X-Men here, which I think is taking from a time where the X-Men go back to the past. I can't fully remember. I need to like look up more things for that. This is really me coming at this from my own mind. I think there are times when people don't realize that when I do these videos, I have point form notes here that are based on things I noticed in the episode. And sometimes I look a few things up, but I don't dive too deep. When I used to work for another channel, I would script everything and spend like hours doing just like tons of research. And I still do that when I need to for stuff. But this is a very different method. I'm not scripted. I'm literally looking at you. There are no I'm not reading anything. The only thing I'm reading is my notes over here and then using those to guide me, and then just kind of whatever comes out, comes out. So I think that's what we're doing here, but I'm not 100% sure. So if there's something that you know of that time period of that story, feel free to let me know down in the comments, because I already know I want to go and read Rise of Apocalypse. I know I want to check out some other things, Uncanny X-Force, maybe some Uncanny Avengers. I'm adding so many things to my reading list, and what I love about X-Men, the animated series, and X-Men 97 is it always gets me so hyped to go back to the comics and read stuff. It's a delight, is what it is. So this episode is written by J.B. Ballard and Beau DeMayo? Question mark? I thought Marvel had fully cut ties with Beau DeMayo, so I am a little confused. Beau DeMayo seems to also have kept his creator credit, I think. On IMDb, he's still listed as the creator for X-Men 97, and he is also listed as an executive producer on season 2, so I don't know what's going on with that. I tried to look more into it, but there's not a lot of information out there. I'll update you if I hear more, but just wanted to make note of that because I feel like not a lot of people are talking about it. Everyone's releasing an article on Beau DeMayo, and very few people other than comicbookmovie.com seem to be acknowledging that he has credits on season 2. Everyone's acting like he's been fully removed, and I'm like, well, but the credits are saying otherwise, so that's interesting. I think episode 3 was honestly my favorite of the batch. I think that they honestly get progressively better as you go. Even though episode 2 was amazing and I loved it, what I loved about episode 3 was the story and the pacing, and it just really drew me in. But Magneto trying to teach En Sabah Nur how to be a good guy was not on my bingo card in this season, but I'm glad that it happened because it was a wild time. And of course, we don't know. Maybe it will still have some effect on En Sabah Nur for the better. We'll have to wait and see as time progresses. Time seems to be a really big theme in this episode. And of course, we have Rama Tut here, who is another version of Kang the Conqueror, who you may also know as Immortus. He's had many different names throughout time, and Rama Tut is one of those names. So seeing him here, which we already guessed he was going to be here because of some stuff that we saw in the trailer, was really cool. And I don't know how much he's going to be involved in the show, but I have some theories about that. Bishop, of course, comes in here to save everybody's butt, and he does that right after Charles is trying to get all this information out of Logos's mind, who is captured by En Sabah Nur and held here. And when he can't get the information that he wants, we find out that everything's kind of going sideways, and that's when Bishop reveals that he's been undercover as one of the Sandstormers, and he helps to save the day as the X-Men all band together and fight together. A lot of moments of that happening in these first 3 episodes, which I thought was really fun. Which brings me to Charles's vision that he has when he goes into Logos's mind. There's this voice that reaches out to him, and it made me wonder, is Kang going to be the real big bad here? Also, I think the temple we're looking for might have to do with celestial tech. I'm not fully sure, but I think that would make sense. That might be what Rama Tut is looking for, and maybe Apocalypse ends up with it because he doesn't have his celestial tech yet, and he does find that ship in this time period. So is that possible? I guess we'll have to wait and see. And the reason that I think Kang could be the real big bad here is because there are a lot of clues that seem to point to this in Charles's vision. He hears a voice, and it says to him, "Everything everywhere finds its way here, the end. In time, all will see." He is where the end begins, which honestly sounds like something He Who Remains would say, who is a character that appears in Loki season 2, which is another version of Kang who exists at the end of time, where all of the timelines, well, we're trying to maintain the sacred timeline in that show, but there is timelines going off. So I'm just wondering if in the end, Apocalypse will have to join the X-Men. They'll all end up maybe being together, and they'll be fighting Kang. I don't know. I have more thoughts about this. There's also an hourglass time. There's also green waves, and whose colors are green? Kang? Kang's colors are green and purple. And the hourglass even seems to have a little bit of a purplish hue to it. It's not super obvious, but I don't think they want it to be super obvious. However, it may have still been too obvious for me. I don't know. Or it could be totally wrong. I would love to be totally wrong. I love when my theories are wrong because it means that the story is doing things that I wouldn't have even expected, which usually is fun for the most part. But this episode also ends on a cliffhanger with everybody getting blown up. So I don't know what's going to go down with that. Of course, we do know from the trailers that there are some other things these characters need to do. So I don't think they're dead, but I don't know. Time will tell what happens. We'll have to wait till next week to watch the next episode. X-Men 97 Season 2, episodes 1 through 3 were amazing for me. And I thought, it can't get any better than this. And then they dropped episode 4. Welcome back, everyone. We're here today to talk about X-Men 97 Season 2, episode 4, Rise of Apocalypse, part 2. I have so many thoughts about this episode. I cannot wait to get into it with you. But before we do, I need to know, what is your most surprising X-Men moment? There are a lot of good ones to pick from, and there are a lot of weird ones to pick from. It can be from the comics, it can be from the animated series, it can be from the movies, whatever you want to let me know about. But let me know your most surprising one down in the comments below, because this one was a pretty big deal for me. Okay, we're going to be talking about spoilers. I feel like I should say that because this episode is very much an episode I think you should experience for yourself. So, spoiler warning. But when it comes to surprising moments, I was just really not expecting that. I was not expecting Magneto to meet his end here. I know people were saying in the trailer that there wasn't a lot of Magneto when we were getting the trailers released. We only saw a little bit, and it seemed like he was maybe only in a few scenes. But I personally thought they were just trying to keep secrets from us. Like, they were like, there's more Magneto, but can't tell you what he does because it'll be spoilers for secret twists. I wasn't thinking that the twist was going to be that Magneto would be gone. What? I was not prepared. And the other thing that I think is interesting is, could this be how we get to Onslaught? We've all been talking about, will Onslaught appear? A lot of people asked me, do I think Onslaught will be in season 2? And I said, I think maybe if we get to season 3, but this could be planting a seed for Onslaught because Charles is connecting with Magneto's mind as he's passing away, as he's shuffling off this mortal coil. And goodness knows that when you connect your mind with somebody when that's happening, there can be repercussions to that. We did see with Jean the effects of her doing that with her friend when she was young. And I mean, it wasn't like her friend was exactly in her mind, but it impacts the mind. And so maybe this is how we get Onslaught. Something else that I noticed in this episode that I thought was crazy, that I can't believe it took me this long to notice, was Kandra. And of course, it's when Ramatut says external, when she's asking, like, now what do I do? And then I thought to myself, okay, this person that is reminding me of Storm, why does she feel familiar? So she's not Storm, she's an external who, and then I was like, oh my goodness, it's Kandra, because her design is so different in the animated series. Sometimes I forget that. I think of the comics Kandra, who looks quite different. However, I did recently go back and watch this episode with my friend Erica, where we actually have reactions on the channel for our watch through of the animated series that Erica and I are doing together. My friend Erica Buyeras. Look her up. She's an amazing board game designer as well. But in one of the episodes we were watching recently, it was the Gambit episode with the tithing, and they wouldn't stop saying tithe. Tithe was all over the place. Tithe, tithe, tithe. And Kandra is in that episode. So it was very cool to see her here, and now I know. And are we getting more externals? I don't know. Maybe. I would love that. Where's Celine? Give her to me. Give her to me. But that's not the only thing that was crazy in this episode. The fighting looked amazing, and we got some really big epic moments in these fights as we gave everything to stop En-Sabah Nur from going through that portal, from becoming Apocalypse. And yet it does feel like this is kind of a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy for the X-Men. This fate of having to be the enemy of Apocalypse, and in fact, them trying to turn Apocalypse into a hero may have been the very thing that set him against the X-Men, because once he finds out that they haven't been being truthful for him, and I was thinking about this in the earlier episodes that we were watching, in the previous episode, when he sees the X, I thought this can go one of two ways. Either maybe something else will happen and we do actually change Apocalypse, or we've just given Apocalypse a reason as En Sabah, obviously he was En Sabah then, he's Apocalypse now, to hate the X-Men even more. And it seems like it's the latter. So maybe the X-Men created their own problem there with this time travel. Was it fated to happen? It's kind of like what Ramatut warns Charles about, this idea that Apocalypse is inevitable. He's like a fixed point in time. It's gonna happen and it's always gonna be bad for the X-Men, and that is what it is. And I feel like when Ramatut is telling you something like that, you should probably listen. He knows things about time. It felt very TVA, that little dream sequence that Charles has where Ramatut is reaching out to him and they have that little conversation. Everything with Ramatut, it felt very TVA. It's very Loki. We're going into the other versions of Kang, the other names that he uses. There's kind of the Council of Kangs that we see with them gathered. And you know what it makes me think about? Just what Kang could have been for the MCU. There was so much potential for that villain. And things shook out the way they did. But it's also interesting because, yeah, just like, I never would have thought Kang would have been a very viable villain choice. I remember when that was first announced for the MCU, I thought, I don't really know. But man, when you do Kang right, it is so impressive. And I am loving everything they're doing with him in X-Men 97. And I also loved a lot of the stuff that we got in Loki. So, yeah, it's unfortunate that because of everything, we also had to lose just Kang as a character because he's such a cool character. There's also a lot of great acting in this episode. Everything with Rogue, Lenore Zan just knocking it out of the park, talking about her loss of Gambit, talking about that idea of how love is what life is worth living for. There's just so much that when I watch X-Men, I feel this hope for like the world. And I know maybe I shouldn't in this episode because Apocalypse kind of won here, but that idea of that's what makes someone like Rogue a hero, that love is what you live for, even if it hurts you. It's also what makes life worth living. So the pain hurts, but it doesn't necessarily corrupt you because love is like light, you know? Is beautiful. Also, just even at the beginning of this episode, En Sabah Nur's breathing as he's mourning Ball, and this rage is building up inside him. Just breath can be so powerful and so effective emotionally. Use it. So lots of amazing voice acting moments in this. And of course, I loved Ramatut's voice. And I thought to myself, that sounds really familiar too. Who is that? And I looked it up and it's John Delancey. That's right. It's Q from Star Trek. I happen to also be a big Star Trek fan. I don't know if you know this about me, but when I looked that up, I was like, oh, that makes so sense. Also, John is such a great pick for someone like Kang because I think he has the range and the potential to do all of the voices for like all of the identities that Kang has. However, Kang is also a really cool character because you could just have a whole cast of amazing voice actors playing different versions of Kang. I feel like they even made Ramatut kind of look like John Delancey, so that's cool. You know what else is cool? The way that we let Magneto go out in this episode. I mean, sad to see him go, but what an epic way to leave. He's using his powers to close up a black hole. I'm sorry, what? That's some beyond Omega level tier stuff that we're getting. That was insane. And going out on this redemption moment, this hero high. What a beautiful way to have Magneto go. He's just come full circle as a character. And that doesn't mean that we won't see him again. After all, we are dealing with time travel in this season, so it's possible that Magneto could somehow return. There's also my belief of, maybe this is what leads us to Onslaught. Either way, something that I also know is that I already have my number one pick right now for the ultimate romance of this season, and it is Charles and Magnus. Magneto and Professor X, the two of them, the bromance off the charts. Seeing them say goodbye to each other, it just really hit me. And I'm really sad now. Everything was going so well. But also, could this be a way that we get Joseph at some point? I don't know, but I would be interested to see what they would do with Joseph if we do get him in X-Men 97. It also made me sad because it made me wonder why Bishop came back so late. I guess, when you're doing time travel in ancient Egypt, it's probably not easy for you to remember the exact date or time. It's not like it's a period in history where there would have been clocks and calendars all over the place. It's not the modern age. So I'm sure Bishop did his best. And I also don't know how complicated it is to even time travel or pick a time or anything like that or set it up. So I'm sure he did his best. And if he came back earlier, honestly, it probably would have gone the same way. It's Apocalypse. We may have even lost Bishop if he came back earlier. I don't know. He was about to take Charles out, and then he threw back the words that Magneto had given him. When it comes to the emotions that we feel, too, in this episode, I just want to give a little shout out to the music here, because I don't even remember what was happening on the screen at the time. I just remember I was watching it, and I was thinking to myself, I can hear what's going on and the music, and it was adding to every little bit that I was seeing on the screen. And I thought to myself, the music in this episode is actually amazing. And I hadn't even really fully noticed just how much it was doing, except for that one moment where I tapped into it. And then I was like, wow, this sounds great. It feels great. It looks great. The lighting in this episode, the use of shadow. This show is possibly the best thing that Disney and Marvel have produced together. Definitely within the last 8 years, if you combined all of the stuff that they had made, I still think this beats all of it. If you put it all together in one thing. And that's not, I don't want anyone to take that as an insult to other projects that we've seen from Marvel and Disney, because if you have been watching my channel for a while, I'm sure you know there is so much that I have loved in this time. Wonder Man recently was absolutely amazing. We've had WandaVision, we've had Loki. In terms of shows alone, we've been eating well. I loved Fantastic Four First Steps as well. There's been a lot of good stuff. But this, it's just on a whole other level, in my opinion. And I'm sure it's also my attachment to X-Men, obviously. They are one of my favorite teams. They are one of my favorite things of all time. So I know that. I acknowledge that for me, there's that bias. But this show, it's insane how good it is. And I am so happy about it. Well, that was kind of a fun little bait and switch with episode 4. I can't wait to see where we go next. Season 1, episode 5 was the emotional gut punch, and it feels like this season, episode 4 was that. And maybe episode 5 will be more of a filler episode, like we saw with season 1 with Jubilee and Mojo and all of that was going on. This episode that we're going to get next, based on the post-credits, which I did watch, feels like we're going to be seeing a Wolverine team up. And also the Madripoor Knights are here. We got Captain America. We got Black Widow in the suit she wears when she's part of Madripoor Knights. We got Wolverine. But it's also possible, because we have that Weapon X dossier, that this could be where Wolverine's going to get his adamantium back. It's also possible, whenever I think of Weapon X and old teams getting together, I do think of someone like Maverick. Of course, we did see in the trailer Lady Deathstrike and Sabretooth, so maybe that's where we face them. Maybe they even join up with Wolverine at some point. I don't know. A Lady Deathstrike Wolverine team up is crazy, but it could happen. And there is a little part of me that's kind of hoping maybe we'll see Alpha Flight. I don't think it will happen, but hey, a Canadian can dream. And of course, the X-Men are also at least partially back, so there's an opportunity for them to get involved. But I think it is going to be mainly a Wolverine-focused solo story in episode 5. And if you don't know what my Mortal Kombat shirt is referencing, I love Wolverine. So I can't wait to watch the next episode. X-Men 97 Season 2 Episode 5 is brutal in so many ways, and we are laying the groundwork for so many cool things, and I cannot wait to talk about it. Welcome back, everyone. I just watched the newest episode of X-Men, and this is going to be a really fun one for me to discuss with you because, Woo! This was a hot episode. But before we get into this, as this episode was filled with tons of cameos, I need to know from you, who is a cameo that you would like to see make an appearance in X-Men 97? Let me know down in the comments below. All right, where do we start off with this? I think we have to start off with just how my eyes were so stunned by the animation budget in this episode right off the bat. Like, wow, everything looks amazing. There's a lot of action in this episode. The atmosphere, they just did such a great job with it. And sure, there's a little inconsistency after Morph gets some claws run through him by Wolverine. We kind of seem to forget there's like no markings on him. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal, and we still got a lot of really gnarly, crazy stuff going on. And I feel like you could even justify the fact that Morph's physique, when he's shifting, he could technically make it look like he doesn't have a wound, even though he does have one. He doesn't have a super strong healing factor or anything like that to lean on. And we do see it acknowledged near the end of the episode. And, you know, he's probably going to be more focused anyways on saving his friend Wolverine because... oh, this episode also has a lot of brutal heart to it, which we'll talk about in a bit. There is a lot of characters in this episode that appear, including one that I never thought I would see, Garrison Kane. Quite a deep cut, which if you don't know, Garrison Kane is part of, or was part of, the Six Pack as well, which is also referenced in this episode. There's so many Easter eggs, so many references we're going to talk about in a minute. But yeah, I loved seeing him here, even though it was a short-lived appearance, and potentially he's gone now. Rest in peace. However, it is comics, so anyone that's gone, just remember, it's comics that this is based on, so there is a good chance we could still see them return at some point. Another person that I loved seeing here, another character who I always love seeing team up with Wolverine, is my boy Maverick. That's right, we brought Maverick back in this episode. I loved seeing him, and I was kind of hoping when Wolverine said he was teaming up with his old crew that Maverick might make an appearance. Granted, he is also one of the characters that had a very tragic fate, but that doesn't mean that we won't see him again. The other cool thing is that with the appearance of Garrison Kane in the episode, there is the potential for another Strife connection there, because Garrison Kane is another character who kind of has an interaction with Strife in the comics, and so I am still wondering, still pondering, could Strife be appearing in the future? Is it possible? I don't know. I hope so. I think Strife is a really interesting and really fun character, so fingers crossed. And speaking of Strife and Garrison Kane and all these cameos that we got, the DVDs alone give you so many things to look forward to. I mean, there is that six-pack reference that I noticed. That was one of the ones I picked out. Also, Phantom X, even X-23, and honestly, there are so many references in the DVDs alone. I think I'm gonna have to do a video just on that, so stay tuned, because I'll probably have a video for you soon where I break down all the different DVDs and what they're referencing. And speaking of those references, they don't end with the DVDs, of course. We have Morph transforming into just about everyone in this episode, from Fantastic Four's Ben Grimm, The Thing, to Spider-Man, to Deadpool, to Silver Samurai, to Puck. Just so many amazing references in this episode. Man, they really jam-packed it. It's a filler episode, but there is a lot in here for you to enjoy if you're an X-Men fan. And speaking of being an X-Men fan and really being a very big Wolverine fan, I must say, I love Wolverine so much. And something that I was very happy to see in this episode was the characterization of Victor Creed. It was done so well, and we get to see kind of both sides of Victor in this, you know? You get to see the fact that he's not the most book smart. You know, when we're talking about the broods, he refers to them at one point as breeds. It's just one of those breeds. But then he also is a very savvy person. I think something that we need to remember with Victor is that he is, you know, a master planner and a master strategist. And so when he's handling the tech equipment, we also get to see the capability of him as well, how he's kept up with tech over the years, and he still is smart in his own way. And that is something that I think a lot of people forget with Victor. They just think he's a big dumb villain, and he isn't. I really like Victor Creed. So for me, it's very important that Sabretooth's characterization is done well. And we don't just have a character that is done well in terms of how they're written here. We also have with Sabretooth a great voice coming in. Now, the original voice actor for X-Men in the animated series was actually Don Franks, but he passed away, so he was not able to, carry on that legacy of this role. But we do have an amazing voice actor stepping up to the plate, and he did a great job. And that is Darren DePaul, who I feel like is a man of a million voices. If you look up his credits on IMDb, the list goes on and on and on. He's been in everything. And case in point, he's not just doing one voice here and knocking it out of the park. No. He's also the voice of Omega Red, which I also feel he knocked out of the park. And I say that as someone who is also an Omega Red fan. I think the animation they did for Omega Red in this was amazing. His characterization was perfect, and he even has such a cool theme here. Oh, the theme. It was everything. We're going to talk more about the sound in a minute, but before we do, I want to continue on with some of the voices here because we do have someone new stepping into the role of Lady Deathstrike. New in terms of to this character, but not new in terms of the voice acting world. This is Erika Ishii. Erika Ishii has been in everything from Mortal Kombat 1 to Ghosts of Yotei as well, so you're probably familiar with her voice. She did a great job in this, and I'm not really entirely sure why they didn't bring back Jane Luke, who voiced Lady Deathstrike originally. She is still alive. I'm not sure if I said her name right, by the way, but I hope I did. Sorry, Jane, if I messed up the pronunciation of your last name there. But she's still working, so maybe there was a scheduling conflict or something. I don't know what happened with that, but having Erika Ishii in here, I mean, she's a rising star, and she did a great job. It was lovely to see her here. I mean, a rising star, but she's also done a lot of work, so yeah. She's great. And what they did with Lady Deathstrike's character I also thought was interesting. She's kind of a combination of Yuriko and Mariko. I think that is cool for Lady Deathstrike because it gives her a lot more to work with in terms of her relationship to Logan in this. It makes their relationship a lot more interesting and a lot more complex. Because in the comics, Lady Deathstrike, while I love her, she is sort of just someone who's driven to hate Wolverine because of her loyalty to her father, and she feels like Wolverine stole the adamantium bonding process, even though he originally never asked for it and didn't necessarily want that to happen to him. But in this episode, he actually does want that to happen to him because this is not just a filler episode in terms of just a one-off Wolverine story. We are doing some character building here. We are doing some relationship building. We're working on the friendship between Morph and Wolverine, deepening that connection, showing how Wolverine has saved Morph so many times, and now it's Morph's turn to save Wolverine from being the Brood. And I also love that we got that Wolverine as a Brood cover sort of reference in here, like they did, I think, a 1-for-1 even. It looks so good. We even sort of got Wolverine taking out all the Brood in his undies, kind of. It wasn't quite to that extent, but his costume was all ripped up. I like that. That was cool. And with Morph stepping in to sort of save the day here for Wolverine, I love that we also reflect on the fact of Wolverine's relationship with himself. Morph is being told by these villains who are teaming up with Wolverine here, but who have fought against him in the past. This is who Wolverine is. He is the animal instinct. So maybe it's best that we leave him, that we put him down, because that's who he is. But Morph is not settling for that. He believes his friend is more than that. And the sad fact is that, Logan struggles with that. He doesn't believe that he's more than a weapon. And I feel like this episode is both really sad and just really heartwarming to see Morph care about Wolverine so much, to go in after him even when it feels like he's doomed, to not give up on him. And then we get that adamantium bonding process again. And we also find out that Wolverine kind of went in here for that because he feels if he doesn't have his adamantium, he doesn't really have anything. And that's who he is. It's sad. That is very much Wolverine, honestly, to a T. He does struggle with this idea of the animal instincts inside him, the rage, and wondering, how much of that is him, how much of that is his life and sort of what has happened to him, and then where do we draw the line? Is there more to Wolverine than that? I think there is, but I do know that Logan struggles with that. And I think it was such a fun team up too. I mean, getting to see Wolverine team up with Lady Deathstrike and Sabretooth and Maverick and short-lived, but Garrison Kane and Morph. This was This was really fun, and I love getting to see a sort of villain hero team up. I always think that's really great, really entertaining. But getting to see Wolverine team up with Sabretooth, it's one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite things, and they did such a good job with it because Sabretooth, oh my goodness, he's so petty. He's so petty, and I love it. Even when they're teaming up together, he can't help but, just try to poke Wolverine as much as possible. And the episode isn't just great for the characterizations, the story, the animation, but the sound design in this episode, it was juicy. I mean, this is a brutal episode for the emotion that we feel. This is a brutal episode for the terror that we are exposed to here. And this is also a brutal episode for just how much we're tearing people apart. And a big part of that comes down to making sure that you feel that as a viewer through the sound. And when I'm talking about sound design, I'm talking about the music, but I'm also talking about just even the way that the voices are done in this. Wolverine, when he's in the tank and he lets out that scream, the way that these characters talk to each other, and I was listening with my headphones on, you feel like they're right around you. And it really did create that sort of eerie, creepy feeling. It was intense, and I loved it. So great job, sound design. Overall, it's just a really fun, really well done episode. And yeah, it is filler, but it's filler where we're doing the work for the characters and even building the groundwork for future stories. And that is so cool, man. That's why I love X-Men 97. They don't phone it in. They put the work in and it shows. So another great episode. I had a great time with it. Anthony Saletti, who wrote this one, hats off to you. As a Wolverine fan, I was appeased. When it comes to X-Men 97 Season 2, based on Episode 6, I have to ask, are we going too fast? Welcome back, everyone. We're here today to talk about X-Men 97 Season 2, Episode 6, Danger.exe. I just watched this episode, and I have a lot of thoughts about this. I think let's start off by focusing on some of the things I absolutely adored about this episode, and then we will move into the concerns that I feel many people are having, myself included, and some of the questions I'm asking myself after this episode in terms of the direction for season 2. Before we get into it, I want to know, we are halfway through the season now. How are you feeling about it so far? Are we feeling good? How are we feeling? Let me know down in the comments below. Let's start off with one of my favorite parts of the episode, and I have to say, that is Polaris. Wow. I loved Polaris in this episode. I thought we were doing some great exploration here with Lorna Dane, and in fact, I loved it so much that I wish there was more of it. I wish we went even further with it because that's how much I was enjoying it. So it's not really a criticism, because what it means to me is that I'm having such a good time, I just want more. And this is not a short episode. It feels like it's close to about a 30-minute runtime, and I think usually we're just over like the 20 mark. Of course, I'm doing this right after watching the episode, so please do take what I'm saying for some points of this with a bit of a grain of salt, because I am in the midst of traveling, so I have to do this video a little quickly. So bear with me here. But it felt like it was a longer episode in terms of the runtime, but they really carried the momentum of it. It felt very cinematic. It felt larger than life. It felt very dramatic. And all of that feels like it's a reflection of Polaris and what she's going through in her story and her character. And I am not a big Polaris person in the comics, but I gotta say, after this episode, I want to read more Polaris. I want to be Polaris. I love her hair. I love so many things about her. And now I understand a little bit more why people were so excited for her to appear here. So give me your Polaris comic recommendations in the comments, because I need to read more, clearly. I need to read more Polaris. Something else that I loved about this episode is the voice actress that we have for Danger here. I think it's Rachel Kimsey. I hope I'm saying that right. I just read it in the credits. She does an amazing job with Danger's voice. It's a little bit raspy. It's, of course, got a filter on it. It's technological sounding, but that menacing but polite nature beautifully blended together. And I even feel everything we're building with Professor X in this episode is being handled really well. The fact that we revisit this heartbreaking moment at the beginning of the episode where Magneto passes on and what Charles went through witnessing that, I thought they were just replaying this to tug at our heartstrings, but no, we're doing this because Charles is really in his feelings right now, and it is what's motivating him to make this choice to create X Corp, to find a sort of legal loophole to continue his school and sort of continue on with the X-Men, but under a different umbrella, under a different name, so that he can continue to do the work that he feels he must do. And also honoring Magneto's memory with his approach here, kind of becoming a little bit more Magneto-esque. Definitely feels like Onslaught has been confirmed at this point. I just want to say Onslaught's coming. There is no way that you're going to tell me we're going to talk about Professor X searching his mind for a little piece of Magneto and calling on that when he is bringing some power to Lorna, using that piece of Magneto that's within him to boost her power. Onslaught, just get ready, because it's going to be crazy. So I enjoyed what we built with Professor X in terms of the overall story, but there are some elements here that I think we need to acknowledge that are maybe missing. Are they missing? Do we need them? How important are they? One of the biggest things for me is the accountability here for Professor X. He is the one that allowed Danger to become a danger. He created the Danger Room, and a lot of the accountability that we have when Danger manifests and becomes this villain is in discussing Professor X's approach. He says that he wants to help mutants and do all of these things and help younger mutants, find a place for them, and yet he's constantly putting his students in danger for their benefit, which is something that's really messed up about his legacy. And then the other thing is his ignorance towards what Danger was becoming, the evolution of the program, and the fact that she herself is a mutant who, in this instance, has been oppressed by someone like Charles. So we're not acknowledging as much the darker elements of what Danger represents for Professor X. That's something that I think is missing here, but that's not to say that we couldn't get into that later, or that we couldn't get into that even when we get to Onslaught. It feels like right now the approach is going to more be that it is Magneto's mind within Charles and the melding of those two that's twisting Charles and messing him up. But even as we unpack the effects of Onslaught when we get there, there could be a time period where we pick apart Charles more and examine that maybe the dark side actually came from him. Maybe it's less Magneto. Maybe they both have a dark side. Maybe that's why also they're such good friends. So there's lots of stuff we can get into later on, so I'm not too worried, but I was a little disappointed, I won't deny. However, there seems to be an even bigger conversation here to be had, which is, of course, the absence of Emma Frost. Now, Charles gives this speech and also uses a tactic that echo Emma's speech and her tactics at the beginning of Astonishing X-Men, which is from Joss Whedon's run. Emma welcomes the students and says that what she wants to do, her approach to teaching them, is going to be to make sure that they can find a place in the world alongside humans, but also to remember that while they still need to respect and coexist with humans, they should never trust them, because they are always seeking to cause harm to them. And so her use of the Danger Room in her speech is about preparing these kids for what is coming, which is humans are always going to have a reason to hate us, and we're just gonna have to deal with that forever. So never let your guard down. Now, with Professor X's approach to this tactic in this episode, instead, he is using the Danger Room to showcase his own sense of failure, his own guilt, in regards to what happened with Magneto not being prepared, and to really want to prepare these students for the world at large. He feels it's getting more dangerous, and he feels that he needs to kind of change up a little bit his approach here. But he's not saying to them, never trust humans. So while I have seen some comparisons of Emma's speech and Charles's speech, I went back and read Emma's, and I went back and watched the speech again from the episode. They are different speeches that have different motivators behind them, but the tactic, of course, was Emma's. So is it fair that we're giving it to Charles, and what do we lose from the story when we do that? I guess the challenging thing with Emma Frost at this point in the show is that we really haven't built her up enough to have her come in and have this moment. We need more Emma Frost character building for her to really get in here and make an impact on the show. So I am hoping that they're going to do that, because I am also an Emma Frost fan and I would love to see that. But based on what we have right now, I don't see how that would have been possible for this episode. So while I can understand Emma fans, I mean, myself included, perhaps being frustrated or upset that we're losing that with Emma, on the other side, I think they're just focusing with this show on what they're already building up this season. And of course, with serial media, there's always going to be that temptation to kind of overanalyze something based on one chapter when we don't have the full story. But that's why I would like to reserve my judgment overall to how this episode fits in with the larger story until the larger story is done, until season 2 is complete. And then of course, if it doesn't work, I will be the first one to come back and say, guess what? I watched all of season 2 and it didn't work, and here's why. But so far, I am still enjoying this season, and I think the animation that we got in this episode, the overarching themes and how things are being woven together, I feel good about all of that. I do think there is a little bit of emotion that was missing for me with this episode, and I'm not fully sure why. So I wish I could give you more of a deeper analysis on that, but I do need to reflect more on it. But it just felt that the writing here, it felt a little bit flat for me, in the sense that what we're saying, I guess, felt more just what was happening. It was just, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I'm thinking, I'm just saying it. So it was less subtextual maybe in this episode. But like I said, I haven't analyzed it enough. So come back to me with that one and I'll have more in-depth thoughts. Overall, I enjoyed the episode. I thought it completely drew me in, and I am very excited to see where they go with it next, to see what we explore with Charles's character. This is a very interesting era for him in the comics that we're exploring. And yeah, I mean, are we paraphrasing a lot of stuff here? Are we tweaking things? Yes, but is that also what X-Men, the animated series, and X-Men 97 has been about since the beginning of the show? Yes, it is. And so, the comics will always be there, and we can definitely go back and read them and read every single issue and every single little story beat. And those are still important and impactful, but that's the comics and this is the show. And there are going to be those changes. And of course, how you feel about that is up to you. So I'll let you tell me some of your thoughts on this episode down in the comments below. I want to hear about it. How are you feeling? How are we feeling about X Factor? One thing I do need to say, the cameos in this episode were amazing. My boy Dupe, they got Beak. Glob is here again. Oh my goodness. I was having such a fun time. So many fun characters showcased here with their cameos. Jono's back. I mean, yeah. It's always a delight to see what cameos we're going to get. We even got Morph turning into Reed in the background. I mean, yeah, maybe there's more that I need to talk about. Maybe we'll do a video on some of the cameos that we've had this season, because there are so many wonderful characters here that I would love to shout out and showcase and get people interested in, so that we can all go back and read the comics and love them all over again, For some characters, this episode was everything I could have ever wanted. But for other characters, what are we doing? Welcome back, everyone. Today we're here to talk about X-Men 97, Season 2, Episode 7, Strange Land, Savage Heart. That's right, we're going to the Savage Lands in this one, which I knew this episode would be coming because I saw the trailers for the show. And before we get into discussing it, because there are some things that I absolutely loved about this episode, and there are some notes that I have, is what I would say, some constructive criticism for this episode. But before we get into that, I want to know from you, what do you prefer when it comes to your X-Men stories in the animated series or in the comics? Do you like something that's like one big epic story where we're focusing on one main storyline? Or do you prefer something that is more bite-sized character stories that are self-contained? Let me know down in the comments, because this episode really feels like it is primarily a character story to me. And that is not necessarily bad, but we have had a few character stories in a row. But let's talk about this one and kind of what we're doing. There is also some stuff that we're doing to advance the main world building. Some of the main plot is in here, so there's other things that we're doing. We are mainly focusing on Nightcrawler in this episode. And I have to say, shout outs to Adrian Hugh, who I actually met a couple years ago. I met him at a convention in Phoenix. He was so lovely, so nice, and he absolutely crushed this episode. Honestly, I don't know what more I could have wanted as a Nightcrawler fan. I think Nightcrawler fans are going to be eaten good with this one. So if that's you, let me know your thoughts on their approach to Nightcrawler in this episode. We get to see Nightcrawler not just fight with swords, but we get to see him fight with words. And what is he doing? He's fighting to try and argue for Graydon Creed potentially being redeemable. That's right. Nightcrawler is so devout and believes so much in the goodness of people in the world that he believes even Graydon Creed could find some kind of salvation. And he is trying to argue for his half-brother in this episode, who he actually refers to as just his brother. And I love that Rogue's like, nah, half-brother, really? Really, he's our half-brother. I'd like a bit of distance from that guy. And we go to the Savage Land because that is where the acolytes are, Magneto's acolytes, which I did not think we were going to get to see in this episode. And that is where we're doing the trial of Graydon Creed, with Exodus and his acolytes arguing for Graydon Creed needing to be condemned, him not being redeemable, and Nightcrawler trying to argue that maybe there's more to him than meets the eye. Maybe there is a way for him to find salvation. But while I feel like we did Nightcrawler really well in this episode, like insanely well, even in the end when he's confronting Graydon out in the Arctic tundra there, I thought that was all really well done. There is another character that we need to talk about in this episode that, as a fan, I was a little frustrated with. And that is Magic. Magic is here and she appears, and while I think a lot of Magic fans will be excited to see her, you're also going to be probably immediately disappointed by the fact that she's getting fridged in order to advance the plot of Colossus. For those who are not familiar with the term fridging, it is essentially referring to Kyle Rayner's girlfriend in Green Lanterns, who was killed and literally put in a fridge. And so that's why we call it fridging. So that's when a female character is sacrificed to advance a main character's plot. And that is definitely what happened with Magic here, especially because somehow we show her being able to teleport people to safety, and then the next instant she just pulls out her soul sword, stands there, looks at the Sentinel, looks back at Colossus, looks back at the beam, and in theory, I think would have actually been vaporized the way that the animation shows it. And I thought to myself, maybe there's some way that Magic could survive. Maybe she's going to teleport, because the fact that she didn't teleport at all and she just did that is weird to me. And yet we get a body. So I don't know if Magic is still somehow out there, or if there's going to be another way that we bring her back later on. I'm sure she'll return, but I'm a little frustrated at how we handled her demise here. It felt like they wanted to revisit Genosha and give us another moment that was like what happened to Gambit, except what happened to Gambit makes a lot of sense. He was in a place where he was able to utilize his power set to defeat the Sentinel, to take it out, but he knew it would cost him his life. Now, in this instance, we just have Magic doing a very slow, dramatic look, and that's the only reason why she dies. It feels really weird and it just feels silly. I don't know. I really didn't like that. But there is still a lot to enjoy about this episode, including, I think, Colossus. So while Magic may have died to advance his plot, he is done really well, I think, here. And the cool thing about him, what I like, is that we get to see both the hard and the soft side of Colossus. We get to see how the loss of his sister kind of turned him into someone who believes there needs to be people that are punished for this. He joins up with Exodus, who of course in the comics we know is a villain, who reveals his true colors in this episode as well. And yet at the same time, we get a moment where when we're looking at this beautiful vigil of everyone that's been lost in Genosha, he has this painting of Ilyana that he himself painted. So we're remembering that Colossus is also this soft, kind of gentle giant who does also paint. That is a canon thing in the comics, and I love that we kept it alive here. So that was cool, and I liked seeing both sides of him, the one that wants to condemn and the one that is willing to forgive. Not because he can forgive, but because it's something that Illyana would want him to do. And I also feel like that was a beautiful moment at the end of the episode with Nightcrawler, where we see him in his hardened mutant form. And I love also they even kept him shrinking about a foot, because if you didn't know, Colossus is actually about a foot or over a foot taller. He's over 7 feet when his powers are activated. But in his human form, he is shorter. He's still tall. He's still over 6 foot, I believe. I think he might be like 6'4". And then I think he might be 7'7" in his metal form. Don't quote me. I don't have this written down. I'm just going off my brain right now and what I remember. But yeah, that was cool. And I liked how there was that, I didn't forgive you. And then he shifts and he's like, but Illyana would have. Kind of cute. And I think the fact that Exodus reacted in the way he does means that Colossus would have said that Creed was innocent or, redeemable. I don't know if we would call the man innocent, but he had the potential to be redeemed, because I think he was considering what Illyana would have wanted in that moment. And it's a nice callback to earlier in the episode as well, when Nightcrawler is asking, is this what Illyana would have wanted? And Colossus basically says that it doesn't really matter what the dead want because they're dead. So they don't get to have a voice anymore, which is the tragedy of everything. But I do think it's important to consider the people that you're fighting for and why and what they would have wanted. Because if you're fighting in their name and you're not really representing them in the way that you would have known them in life, then what are we even doing here, right? I mean, then literally we're just fridging someone. So I like that Colossus decided, you know what, maybe we shouldn't just have magic die just to advance my hatred of Graydon Creed. That would be nice. Exodus in this episode is also really cool to see. I love seeing him appear anywhere. I just think he's such a cool character, such a cool villain. He's extremely powerful. So it's cool to see people go up against him. And I like how he initially appears as kind of this level-headed, look, like we're trying to build a new world. We're trying to hold people accountable. Is it really bad? Maybe he's got some points as the head of Magneto's acolytes. And Nightcrawler just calls him out and is like, from the day that you were born, you're just a guy that's been looking for your 15 minutes of like faith fame. That's all this is for you. And you are not really what faith should be represented as. Basically, Exodus is more of a fanatic, He's using people's emotions to drive his own agenda, drive his own cause, and do his villainous stuff. And there's so many cameos in Magneto's Acolytes. Honestly, that could maybe even be its own video. We might need to talk about the Acolytes. And it's cool to see the Acolytes here, because I even was talking about this in my Easter egg video when I was talking about Fabian Cortez. He does have a connection to the Acolytes in the comics. And while I didn't think we were going to see that here, we kind of did see that here in a different way, because this is Exodus with the Acolytes, not Fabian. Obviously, Fabian is gone, so that's that. But it was cool to see them appear and to see that one of my Easter eggs that I noticed actually did come into play. Wild. The fact that this sword fight that happens between Exodus and Nightcrawler is over Graydon Creed's soul, over his ability to potentially be redeemed, I also thought was really neat. I never thought that that's where that sword fight was going to happen. So that was a cool, fun little surprise for me. And I liked getting to see the X-Corp team go into action here. We do get some cool character moments, even outside of Nightcrawler. Bishop and Polaris have a little bit of a flirty thing, and I enjoyed that. When I was at San Diego Comic-Con, I actually met Polaris when I was at a party. Shoutouts to Carolina Ravassa, who I met at a party, and she was so cool. I even got a picture with her. Maybe we'll put that up here. I'll send the picture to my editor so we can have that. She was so cool, and she was saying, if you liked the last episode for Polaris, because I was just like, you were amazing in the last episode. I loved it. And I was telling her I loved the previous episode. I loved everything she did with Polaris. And she said, well, wait till the next episode. And we did get a little bit more of Polaris. We get a little bit more of Bishop. So we're getting these cool character moments for other characters, which I like. But I do worry a little bit about the overall season in terms of how this affects our momentum for the main story. Because the one thing I am feeling a little bit with X-Men 97 season 2 is it too many cooks? Is it too many elements at play? Too many story things, too much going on in the world, too many characters? Because we do have Apocalypse. We do have Graydon Creed running for president now. That's what we're establishing here. We've got X-Force, we've got X-Factor, we've got now X-Corp coming in. We've got the power struggle between all these different teams. We've got potentially Kang could still come in and be our real villain at the end. I still think that's possible. So there's a lot going on and a lot of characters. And I know I was saying before that I was a little nervous about that, and I'm starting to get a little more nervous. I do think season 1 just felt like this was an opportunity for us to bring back a show we loved. We might only get one shot at this, so let's throw everything we have. So every episode, every moment felt very important, very impactful. And while I love this episode for Nightcrawler, and I know it is a character episode, not necessarily a main plot episode, I do worry that we just have kind of lost the main plot a little too much at this point, just because this episode is coming after a Wolverine episode, and then what I would say was predominantly a Polaris episode, also Danger, and we did still advance some stuff with the characters and the main plot in those episodes. This episode is also kind of doing that because we have Graydon Creed running for president, but it is primarily a Nightcrawler episode. But the good news is, at the end, seems like we're going to be getting back to some Apocalypse stuff. Maybe. I mean, Apocalypse is a skeleton. What's up with that? What I think may be happening here is Gambit may have become a new host for Apocalypse, and so Apocalypse is probably not gone. I definitely think I'm starting to get used to, maybe a little too much, the idea that X-Men is loving to kind of trick us into stuff. So they'll show you one thing, but then really something else is going on. You thought it was one way, but actually here's what really happened. So I think they're trying to psych us out by making us feel like, oh no, is Apocalypse dead? I don't think so. I think he's somewhere out there. Or perhaps he's taken a new form. Perhaps he's evolved. It is also possible that in some way he might be temporarily gone. Maybe Gambit did like drain him of his life energy when he came back. So we'll have to wait and see what's going on with that. But it could even be, if Gambit is the new host body, that Fabian Cortez being in Cable's dossier was a hint towards what was going to be happening here, which would be interesting because that is another connection to Fabian Cortez. A lot to think about, a lot to consider. What I will say is, overall, I still enjoyed this episode. I had a fun time with it. I just have a few notes, and I am a little bit concerned. I'm still loving season 2, but I don't know if I'm loving it as much as season 1. But that isn't to say that I'm not liking it. So, I'm not saying that I hate it. I'm not saying that I'm over the moon in love with everything, but there's a lot to like, and there are some things I think to be critical about here. With only one episode left in X-Men 97 Season 2, after a bunch of one-shot episodes, the question remains, will we be able to pull this story together? Welcome back, everyone. Today we're here to talk about X-Men 97 Season 2, Episode 8, Dead Man's Hand. The Dead Man's Hand. And of course, it might not be a surprise who that hand belongs to, but it may be a surprise what that person is up to here. So let's talk about it. Before we get into it, I want to know, what's an X team that you would love to see featured in the show? Because we have a lot of X teams, especially in this episode. So we're going to start off by talking about the thing that I've been waiting to talk all season about, and I'm so glad that it's back. Gambit and Rogue. Oh, they're back together again, and it feels so good. It felt so weird not having that romance that I love so much. It's one of my favorite things, honestly, about the X-Men is Gambit and Rogue together. So finally, we do get to see them sort of reunite in a way in this episode. And something that I also enjoyed about it is just how the threads of the story are really coming together here. Because we are not just bringing Gambit back, we are bringing so many elements that we have built throughout season 2 back into the fold and really weaving together a cohesive story at this point. We got a little scattered, I think, in the middle. We're just kind of going all over and also probably planting seeds for season 3. I think the stuff with Creed is going to come back around. Maybe not in this season, but next season, definitely. I mean, Creed is running for president. That's huge. And with everything coming in together, with us seeing all these references, back to the earlier episodes, like Nathan's destiny to take out Apocalypse, or the conversation that Rogue and Apocalypse have about love and that experience. With all of that finally weaving back in here, this also means that because Apocalypse is coming to the table, we're seeing all teams come out of the woodwork. This episode primarily focuses on X-Corp and X-Force, but there is some other X-Factor stuff later on that we are going to talk about. And we even reference externals. And externals, while they're not necessarily a team, they are kind of a subset of mutants that are of their own type. So we do talk a little bit about even externals in this. Something that I love about what we're doing with featuring so many different groups as well and so many different characters is that we really get to see the different approaches the characters have to heroism. There's different morals and there's so much diversity within even just the X-Men area of the Marvel Universe. So seeing this showcased in season 2, where we're really expanding the reach of what mutants can represent, what they can be, and the struggles that they deal with, I think is really cool. However, there are pros to it, and I think there are also some cons to that. Because when you have so many characters here, it is easier for you to maybe make some mistakes. And I will say in this episode, although I enjoyed it, I did notice a little bit of a continuity error. We have Jean outside the ship flying around when Gambit and his people attack. And then we have Jean inside the ship and then immediately outside the ship. It's kind of like, and even the inside to outside, I could understand because we do see her fly up, but her being outside and then immediately inside at the table where we're planning our meeting here, our plan of attack, and Cyclops says we need to get Gambit now. I think that was a continuity error. Either that, or was it Morph? Or is Madeline Pryor still alive? I would love for that to be true. I'd love for Maddie to come back in season 3. Heck, I'd love for Maddie to come back in the finale episode. Who am I kidding? More Maddie, please. Sign me up. So yeah, we do get little continuity errors, but we also struggle, I think, a little bit to really dive deep into some of the characters. And that has been something I've been talking about throughout the season, and I also felt it a little bit in this episode. Because we have so many players on the board, it does mean that we miss out on some of those intimate moments where we get to dive deeper into who these characters are and what they're thinking about. However, that being said, we still got a couple nice little ones here. Definitely some stuff with Rogue and Gambit that I thought was very touching. And also we get a cute little moment with Nathan, Cable, and his parents, Jean and Scott, talking about, why didn't you ever tell us that we met you as a kid? Why was this something we never discussed? And I think it's really sad and really telling when Cable says that he just didn't think it mattered because time always rips his parents away from him. So he just knows anytime he's with them, it's going to be short-lived. Ouch. And of course, a huge factor in that is, I think, Cable's destiny, which comes into play in this episode. Cable feeling that he has to go after Apocalypse, I think it's the only way that he feels he'll be able to rest. So it does make sense that that is his main goal here in episode 8. We also get a really amazing Gambit reveal. We've been waiting for it. They've been teasing it forever. Since back at the end of season 1, I feel a lot of us knew Gambit would probably return. This is comics after all. Not many characters get to stay dead in comics. And Horsemen of Death was something we've all been talking about for a while, but finally, we get the full reveal. We get the full outfit. We get the full power set. So Gambit seems to have the ability to kind of possess people or influence them with his powers. He turns them into almost like revenants that have to follow his commands and that are perfectly in line with him. We see this when he's in New Orleans and he is surrounded by his friends, the Assassins Guild, the Thieves Guild, the people he grew up with. His ex, Belladonna, is there. I love when Bella comes back. And he's invited them to this meeting spot because he wants to take them over. And he does this with cards. He throws a card and boom, you are possessed, basically. You are now fully under Gambit's control. He does this to Kurt as well. And we also find out in this episode that Rogue's powers do not affect him. Rogue tries to use her powers to subdue him when they're trying to get through to Gambit. She takes off her glove. She touches his face. And nothing happens, which probably is so many mixed feelings for Rogue. There's that shock of, I can't believe this isn't working. And there's that shock and that amazement and almost the delight I feel that we see in her reaction, where she can touch Gambit and she doesn't hurt him. Probably because he's dead. So, how do you take the life energy out of someone that's dead? You don't really. We also get confirmed in this episode that Apocalypse has indeed jumped ship. Now, when we were talking about his skeleton appearing, I was saying that could be something that Apocalypse is doing, especially because we went into the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix in this season. And in that story, which is really weird if you read the comic version, you can find my full thoughts on that over on my Patreon, where you can also find my full reactions to all the X-Men 97 season 2 episodes. It's a weird story. It gets really weird, and Apocalypse is looking for host bodies, and it seems that he's found one in this case with Gambit. So Apocalypse is actually hiding within Gambit, kind of melded to him. And this is also kind of interesting because it plays with that conversation that we saw Rogue and Gambit have near the beginning of the season, where they were talking about love. And Apocalypse seems to have never really experienced love. Rogue is talking about her deep love of Remy. And so it makes sense that Apocalypse maybe wants to be in Gambit's body to see what that love is like. Not because he's thirsty for Rogue per se, more because Rogue has such an intense connection with Gambit, and I think Apocalypse wants to experience that. So it is Gambit, but also Apocalypse is within him. And in order for us to really get through, after the attack on the ship, we are in New Orleans, we are in the bayou, and Rogue and Gambit are kind of having this weird ritualistic marriage ceremony that Professor X interrupts. And I loved this moment because we really get to see just how powerful Charles is. Him using his mind to send a psi blast to knock Gambit out and knock him into the astral plane. And of course, on the astral plane, Professor X is extremely powerful there. This is his domain, okay? And he is managing to even kind of pull Gambit, who is stuck outside of himself. Gambit's soul, I suppose, his essence is in there, and he is trying to break out of this darker persona, which really is shaped by Apocalypse being intertwined with him. And Apocalypse even shows himself, and now Apocalypse is also super powerful, so Apocalypse does manage to infect Professor X. That whole thing was crazy. I really loved it. And there even was a really cool team up moment when it comes to the fighting that we see in this episode. Back when we're on the ship and Gambit is attacking the X-Men and X-Force who are teamed up here, I thought it was really cool how we got to see Jean and Psylocke and of course Cable come together to land the ship without any wings on it. They all worked together using their telekinetic powers to land it. That was a really cool team-up moment. Nothing too crazy in terms of the combination of powers because they're all the same, but it really just shows you how powerful Cable is, because I feel like Cable was doing about like 80% of that lifting based on how much of the ship he lit up with his, yellow telekinetic energy. So seeing that was really cool. And we get to see another really cool moment for Kurt. Kurt has been having a really lovely season. I think we've been doing some great work with the character building, both in terms of who Kurt is as a person and his morals and his beliefs, and also just in his fighting prowess. We got to see him sword fighting. Now we get to see him teleporting around, kicking everyone in the face. Of course, Kurt at this point has been possessed by Gambit, so he is there fighting for Gambit, and it just shows you that when Kurt wants to let loose, he can be a very dangerous mutant in terms of his abilities and his teleportation. He can only teleport shorter distances, of course, but he can teleport really quickly, and in a fight, he can just be everywhere exactly where he needs to be. Not only do we get to see him kicking everyone in the face with his feet, but we also get to see him dropping everybody into the bayou pretty much, teleporting them right into the drink. my goodness. We get some interesting lore added in this episode as well, and that is the lore of Kandra and how she gets her, what we would refer to in the comics, I think, is her heart gem, her heart of eternal darkness, which in this version of the story actually comes from Apocalypse. Apocalypse gave it to her, and seemingly in giving it to her through their romance, because it was a part of his power, he turned her into an external. Now, in the comics, Apocalypse and Kandra are both externals. There's a whole group of mutants that are kind of this subclass, if you will. And that's its own thing. But you know what I love about the animated series? That we get to take inspiration from the comics that have come before and do our own version of that story. And so that's clearly what we're seeing here in finding a way to bring Apocalypse back into all of this and kind of also connect Kandra into it. And to be honest, Kandra has always been a character that the animated series has really played with, because their design for Kandra is so unique. It's so different than the comics. And I really love that we get to have these two different, distinct versions of this character who still have a lot of similarities. So yeah, that was cool. Although I will say the whole Kandra and Apocalypse romance, if you will, did disappoint me a little bit, because I was kind of hoping, when we were talking about a great love for Apocalypse, that it could be Genesis. But this is an Apocalypse who says he's never really felt love before. So maybe we don't have a Genesis yet. Maybe, I don't know if Genesis exists. If he's still looking to experience true love, then probably Genesis doesn't exist. Because I do think that Apocalypse and Genesis in the comics really do love each other. And if you don't know Genesis, she was introduced during the Krakoan Age and was kind of retroactively introduced. She's existed in the past, but we didn't know about her till then. Really cool character. Definitely recommend looking her up. And all of the Arakko mutants, honestly. Arakko's a really cool place. Look up Arakko. Do it. But getting back to that romance that Apocalypse so wanted to explore in this episode, I love that we get to see Gambit return, and that Gambit is returning not for some insidious plot. He's not actually acting as Apocalypse's puppet here, at least not as far as we can see. He really just wants to be with Rogue, which is beautiful. And his plan is to use Kandra's heart gem to make Rogue immortal so that they can live together forever, since Gambit, with his new upgrade, so to speak, he will live forever as the Horseman of Death. So he captures Rogue only to propose marriage, which is really quite beautiful and surprising. And even more surprising, perhaps, while this is a lot for Rogue to take in, she says yes. So a new cosplay outfit has entered the chat for me to consider, and that is Rogue's wedding dress, because I gotta say, I love it. I love that she's wearing kind of this burgundy or red outfit. I think it looks so good. And the veil and the hair, girl, please. And when it comes to the X-Men and the X-Force crashing this wedding and trying to get involved to save Gambit, to remove what's infecting him, what I loved about that scene is, while Professor X is the one that goes in for Gambit, and I love how Gambit also calls him on the fact of like, where was this power when I was about to die? Thank you very much. But the person that really saves Gambit in that moment is Rogue, who taps into the astral plane. And when Charles is struggling against Apocalypse's will, she reaches out her hand and she pulls Gambit out of the darker version of himself, out of Apocalypse, and he is free, at least momentarily. I thought that was all really beautifully well done. Do I know how Rogue got into the astral plane? Not really, but it could be due to her emotional connection to Gambit and their proximity. We do see their fingers almost touching each other. It could be that Professor X expanded the astral plane field, and now Rogue is included in that, and she was pushed into the astral plane. It could have been Charles's will in a Gambit, pardon the pun, to bring her in, a last minute Gambit to try to save Gambit. He brought her in to help. And I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. Tears streaming down my face. This was an emotional episode for me. And of course, it doesn't end there. We also get a little teaser at the end. After X-Corp has successfully retrieved Gambit, Cable was trying to take him out because that is his destiny, to defeat Apocalypse, and so he's not taking any chances. He wasn't really there to save Gambit. He said he wasn't going to use brute force, but the whole time, that was his whole play. However, once Gambit has been saved in the astral plane, he's returned to his normal appearance. Rogue has him in her arms, and Jean comes into the frame, and that prevents Cable from being able to take the shot, because obviously he's not going to shoot his mom, one of his moms. You know, Maddie and Jean, both his moms, really. And when we end back up at X-Corp, Gambit is kind of in recovery. He's in the med bay, and we are trying to figure out how to save him, because if we don't get him back soon, his brain's still a little wonky, he will be taken over by Apocalypse. So we're on a timer now to finally save him for good. Meanwhile, some of the X-Force have gone with X-Corp, Jubilee, Sunspot, but we do have a few members that are left to their own devices, and that is Cable, Psylocke, and Archangel, who do not go, and they're trying to figure out how to defeat Apocalypse, how to take out Gambit, and that's when they are surprisingly approached by X-Factor, who are not there to round them up. They're there to make a deal and make a partnership. And Val offers them a card, and the card is from the tarot, and it is the Tower. And this is an interesting card. I think it literally represents the X-Corp Tower. And of course, we've seen in the trailer that it is attacked and that perhaps it will even be coming down. So I think that's where we're headed to in the finale, because we haven't seen that yet. But in the tarot, the Tower card also represents destruction, chaos, change, upheaval. And I wonder if this change is what's going to be taking us into season 3, because we do have a lot of X-Men teams at play here. Some might even say too many to sustain. And so I think we're going to be reduced to one, but the question is, who will come out on top? We'll have to check out the finale to find out the answer to that. Or I think there are some people that may have seen a little sneaky preview of season 3 over at the X-Men 97 panel at SDCC, which unfortunately I was not able to make it to due to just too many things happening at the same time. But I am curious to see who it will be. No spoilers in the chat, please, if you saw that clip. I don't want any spoilers. I'm waiting to find out the old-fashioned way. However, I think considering that the X Factor has the backing of the government, that's probably where I'd put my money. I don't know. I think it might be an X Factor future for us in season 3. In X-Men 97 season 1, we went out with a bang. But was season 2 just as explosive? Or did we fizzle out? Welcome back, everyone. We're here today to talk about X-Men 97 Season 2, the season finale. We are talking about Episode 9, Survival of the Fittest. So when it comes to this finale, how did we do? We're going to be talking about that in this video. But before we get into my thoughts, because I have a lot of thoughts about this finale, I have a question for you. How did you feel about the finale? I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know every little thought that's in your mind, every detail that you picked up upon, that you have an opinion on. Tell me about that down in those comments. I'll see you down there, and maybe I will also even see some of your comments featured in my next video, where I'll do a full review of the season, because even when it comes to this full season, there really is a lot to talk about. Let's continue on though with the finale here, because that's what we're here to talk about in this video. And I want to start off by asking the question, was this episode a hand of God moment? Was it, like we say in theater, a deus ex machina, the machine of God coming in and just fixing everything for everybody? Yes, it kind of was. But does that make sense for this season? I think when you consider that we have Celestials and we have Apocalypse, and Apocalypse does have that connection, we have Essen here, I think that all makes sense. So I do think it going that way is fine. And even when you consider Essen's motivations here, because it is a bit of a quick turn to saying Apocalypse is my guy through and through, and then Rogue coming in and saying, I'm here for love, and Essen all of a sudden deciding, you know what? all right, I'm kind of cool with it. I want to see what happens. That does make sense if you think about the fact that Essen is all about survival. I feel like Essen being a celestial, celestials love to fly around in outer space. They're these cosmic god entities who love experimenting on other worlds and just seeing, what'll happen. It makes sense that he would be like, you know what? I'm intrigued. I kind of want to know what's going to go down. So that all made sense to me in terms of the reason why Essen would make that deal with Rogue and give her that level of power. Because Essen wants to see who's going to win here. Will it be Apocalypse? Am I right? Or is there something in this idea of loving someone so deeply that you're willing to put them above yourself? Maybe that is the way that beings evolve. Let's find out. Rogue sacrificing herself also makes a lot of sense in terms of this ending of the show. I thought that this was absolutely heartbreaking when Rogue was willing to make that deal, but that is what she would do. Of course, Rogue is willing to give up everything for Gambit, just as Gambit was willing to give up everything for Rogue. And that is just the kind of relationship that these two have. Now, would it have been heartbreaking if that's the only way that that went down, and in order for us to keep Gambit, we lost Rogue? Yeah, I would have been devastated if that happened. So I'm very glad that we found another way to work it all out. And of course, that way is with a surprise twist, Nightcrawler sacrificing himself for his sister so that she can be with Gambit and be happy. And I actually thought that was so beautiful. And I think it also makes so much sense when you consider how big of a character Nightcrawler has been this season. And I was saying when I did my episode 7 review, how important I thought that episode was this season. I said, this is like one of the most important episodes that we have. It is a huge character defining episode for Kurt. It shows you not just who he is as a mutant in terms of his power set, in terms of what he's capable of as a hero physically, but it's also showing you morally what kind of character he is, what his philosophies and his beliefs on the world are, on people are, and the power of his faith. And so to have the power of his faith to be the thing that kind of saves the day for everyone here, I thought that was really beautiful. I'm gonna miss Kurt. Oh my goodness. I can't believe we had to lose him, but that is exactly what Kurt would do. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about finishing on those words because I think they are really powerful, especially in what they mean for the whole season. But we'll talk about that a little bit more because we're going to come back to the end in a moment. And if you want to see how moved I was in this finale, because it moved me many times, you can also check out my full reactions, which are available on Patreon. We also have reactions available here for members. The full reactions, though, are up on Patreon at patreon.com/c/vampx13. VAMPX13. I want to talk about some action first. When it comes to the fights, woo, there was a lot going on. And I have been saying this season, we have so many characters. How do we make everyone feel important in this season? And I will say, in the finale, some of these characters that have been more on the sidelines got a little bit more added to their plate. They got a little bit more time to shine, which I liked. Strong Guy got some cool moments, mashing it up with Bishop. We got to see Multiple Man a little bit more in action when it comes to the X Factor. Sadly, Wolfsbane still not getting very much to do, so sad for the Wolfsbane fans out there. But we did get a little bit more, at least, from X Factor. In terms of X-Force, we also saw a little bit more action with Psylocke and with Archangel, mashing it up with Morph and Wolverine. Sadly, the captions spoiled for me the reveal that Wolverine was Morph when they said, Morph is Wolverine, says this thing. But yeah, sad news for any of us that are watching with the captions on, I guess. We just have to deal with the fact that that is revealed right away. Still, though, getting to see these characters have a little bit more, whether it comes to the X Factor members or the X-Force members, I thought that was neat. We also get Siren here in X Factor. She's taking the place of Polaris. And apparently in the X-Men 97 comics, there's a little bit more to her story. I think I might go back and read the X-Men 97 comics for this season and do a video on that. I even do think that some of the stuff that I've been hearing that's featured in there could have been in the show and could have been episodes, but we're going to talk about the pacing of this a lot more in the full season review. And Yeah, I have some thoughts about just how much we even got even within this finale. Because while we're getting all these fights, I mean, we have Havoc versus Jubilee, and I've loved seeing Jubilee continue to evolve here. We also get a callback to an earlier time in this season and in season 1 when she does her little firework kind of boomerang disc that she throws, and she uses that to get rid of the heat-seeking missile. I loved seeing her and Havoc kind of fight it out in jets. I thought that was neat. And I love that Havoc has actually been a recurring presence in season 2. I hope we get more Havoc because he is one of the most interesting characters, I think, in X-Men comics. A character who never really wanted to be a hero, but kind of ends up just kind of getting forced into it through just recurring events where he ends up in these places. And then he has really no choice but to become a hero in the end. So hopefully we get more of him because I like what we're doing with him. I like that he was an antagonist, but it never felt like he was a jerk about it. It always felt like Havoc thought that he is doing the best thing possible, but it doesn't mean that he thinks his opponents are bad people. He can see the potential even in them, and that was something that I liked that we did with this character. So yeah, hopefully more Alex Summers in season 3, fingers crossed. Multiple Man was a character that I thought was a bit surprising in terms of the sound of that character. By the way, I loved, like I said, getting to see him featured here more. I'm a big Jamie Madrox fan in the comics, and I've read quite a bit of Multiple Man. But for me, I always picture his voice as being like a bit nasally, a little bit higher, and he's a little smarmy, he's a little confident, he's kind of a funny guy, and that's how I always imagined his voice sounding. So to hear him sound more gruff in this show kind of threw me for a loop. And we may have already heard his voice before in 97 or the animated series, so maybe I'm just forgetting that that was the sound because I've read so many comics like with him in it in between, and I've developed my own inner voice in my mind. But that was interesting. I don't know. What do you guys think of Jamie's voice in this? Do you like it? Does it work with your headcanon? Tell me in the comments. I loved also seeing Cable being forced to kind of fight against his parents here and their goals clashing. I thought that was really interesting considering that we've been building up this strong family unit from season 1 into season 2. So to see them have to fight against one another, that was a cool and interesting twist. I do wish that we maybe gave it a little bit more fire underneath. I thought maybe at one moment it was going to become a little bit more personal. After all, Cable has had to grow up without his parents, and I thought maybe when they were telling him, you know, you got to trust us, son, you got to do what we're saying here because we're in the right and you're in the wrong, I really thought that he might say, you know what, I'm kind of tired of you guys telling me what to do. You come into my life and you try to tell me who I am. And to be honest, you haven't really been here for a lot of it. It could have been a good opportunity to give him a little dig. But I guess Cable does know that his parents have only done what they had to do. And so we didn't want to break up the family unit too bad. Part of me thought because it wasn't getting personal, maybe this was Strife, but still waiting on that Strife reveal. Still waiting to see. Maybe we'll get some Strife in season 3. I don't know. A girl can dream. Just give me that evil clone. I don't ask for much. Give me all the clones. Where's Joseph at? I also thought it was a weird choice to have Gambit just left in the med bay without any kind of failsafe. I understand we're putting all of our stock here in Rogue, Beast, and Nightcrawler saving the day. But if they happen to not be able to come back before Gambit goes full celestial level, like off the charts, turning into Gampocalypse, then maybe it would have been nice to have some restraints on that guy or something. I can't believe they just had him laying there. I also understand that all of these fires are going off and X-Corp doesn't have a lot of time to respond. They just have to rush off and fight everyone now. And I don't think that they expected that X-Factor and X-Force with Cable taking down their shields would be what they were dealing with today. So I understand, but it is surprising that as they all rushed off, they didn't think, should we like try to do something to withhold this person in case they turn into Apocalypse? Should we? And speaking of Gambit turning into Apocalypse, I will say I think the ending of this finale was a little bit abrupt. We go from Gambit into Gampocalypse, and then that final fight scene is about 3 minutes. And when you compare that to the season 1 finale and the fight against Bastion, which I think was about 6 or 7 minutes long, that is double the amount of time that this final fight was. And my other issue is when Gampocalypse comes in, what does this character really do? Are we doing anything fun that's a mashup of like Gambit and Apocalypse's powers? Are we being creative with how we use the power sets? Not exactly. And even when Rogue comes in, I love to see her come in and save the day and save Gambit because I thought that was beautiful. And I think it makes sense that now that she has this celestial boost, her power set would allow her to take Apocalypse out of Gambit just by touching his cheek. All of that was lovely. However, are we getting to be creative with these power sets? Are we doing something that's new and exciting and interesting and kind of makes you think, oh, wow, I never thought about the power set in that way, but that's neat. Not exactly. And that's been a little bit of an issue with me, I think, throughout season 2, where I feel like season 1 was a lot more specific in terms of the way it showcased power sets, and it was a little bit more creative in the writing of seeing unique ways that characters could use their abilities and even team up with each other. I also feel like in this finale, we didn't have as much detail, not just when it came to the power set, but also when it came to some of the animation. Some of the animation feels a little stiff. There's a lot of PNGs flying around. Now, granted, not all of the animation in the episode is that. They pick and choose their moments. But just when you compare it to the season 1 finale, if you go back and watch, which I did watch after this, you'll see what I'm talking about. And we'll talk about more the comparison of season 1 to season 2 in my full season review and talking about, you know, some of the notes that I have for this season, some of the things that I love, but some of the things that I'd love to see improved upon even more as we head towards season 3. But overall, I did feel it was a little bit rushed. I feel like we kind of sprinted to the ending here, and I feel that way for this episode and a little bit for the previous episode as well. The pacing just feels kind of different, especially when you compare it with the beginning of the season. Now, granted, I feel conflicted here because I think giving Nightcrawler the final say, giving him those last words where he says, "Because I have faith," I thought that was a beautiful way to sum up the season and really, for me, allowed me to open up all of my eyes to what the themes have been about. I think it really ties together season 2 in a nice way. So I loved that. I just wish that it wasn't so rushed to get to that moment. Overall, those are my thoughts on the finale. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. I'll see you down in the comments below, and hopefully I will see you in my full season review. Stay tuned for that. And until next time, friends, as always, you stay nerdy. Bye! And if you love hearing me yap about X-Men, you can hear more of that by clicking right over here.